I'm sorry, kiddos. We have a duck with a broken leg, and something fell over in the duck coop, and all I could hear was him crying, and I just want to make sure he was okay, and it just scared him. He's fine. So I'm sorry I had to pause. All right, we're on page 95. If you're following along with me, Evan just tasted the strawberry slam. It says, Evan swallowed it all in one gulp. Back outside, he got to work. First, he filled his pitchers with water from the drinking fountain. Then, he stirred in the mix. Then, he pulled out the big blue marker and wrote on a piece of paper, $2 per cup. Best price in town. So he's kind of underselling again, right? Remember, the ice cream store was $3. He'd barely finished setting up when the customers started lining up. And they didn't stop. For a full hour, he poured lemonade. The world is a thirsty place, he thought, as he nearly emptied his 4th pitcher of the day. And I am the lemonade king. Later, Evan would think of something his grandma said, pride goeth before the fall. When Evan looked up, there was Officer Ken, his hands on his hips, looking down at him. Evan gulped. He stared at his large holstered gun strapped to Officer Ken's belt. Hello, said Officer Ken, not smiling. Hi, said Evan. Officer Ken did the bike rodeo every year at Evan's school. He was also the cop who had shown up last fall when there was a hurt goose on the recess field. Officer Ken was always smiling. Why isn't he smiling now? Evan wondered. Do you have a permit? Asked Officer Ken. He had a very deep voice, even when he talked quietly like he did now. You mean like a bike permit? That's what the rodeo is all about. If they passed the rodeo, the 3rd graders got their bike permits, which meant they were allowed to ride to school. No, I mean the permit to sell food and beverages in a public space. You need to get a permit from town hall and pay a fee for the privilege. Pay the town hall to run a lemonade stand? Was he kidding? Evan looked at Officer Ken's face. He didn't look like he was kidding. I didn't know I needed one, said Evan. Sorry, friend, said Officer Ken. I'm gonna have to shut you down. It's the law. But there are lemonade stands all over town, said Evan. He thought of Jesse and Megan's lemonade stand when he'd wheeled by with his wagon more than an hour ago. Their stand had looked like a beehive, with small kids crowding around. He had read the sign over their stand. Free face painting, nail polish, hair braiding. What a gimmick! But it sure looked like it was working. You know, said Evan, there's a stand on Damon Road right now. You should go bust him. Officer Ken smiled. We tend to look the other way when it's in a residential neighborhood, but right here on the town green, we have to enforce the law. Otherwise, we'd have someone selling something every 2 feet. But there had to be some way to convince Officer Ken. How could Evan make him understand? You see, I've got this little sister, and we've got a competition going to see who can sell the most lemonade. And I've got to win because she's... He couldn't explain the rest. About 4th grade. How embarrassed he was to be in the same class as his kid sister. And how it made him feel like a great big loser. Evan looked up at Officer Ken. Officer Ken looked down at Evan. It was like Officer Ken was wearing a mask. A no smiling, I'm not your buddy mask. Then Officer Ken shook his head and smiled, and the mask fell off. I've got a little sister too, he said. Love her to death now, but when we were kids, Officer Ken sucked in his breath and shook his head. Whew. Then the mask came back, and Officer Ken looked right at Evan for 10 very stern seconds. Tell you what, said Officer Ken, I do have to shut you down. That's the law. But before I do, I'll buy one last glass of lemonade. How's that sound? Evan's face fell. Sure, he said without enthusiasm. He poured an extra tall cup and gave it to the policeman. Officer Ken reached into his pocket and handed Evan a $5 bill. "Keep the change," he said. "A contribution to the Big Brother Fund. Now clean up your things and don't leave any litter behind." He lifted his cup in a toast as he walked away. Evan watched him go. Wow, he thought, I just sold the most expensive cup of lemonade in town. Evan stared at the $5 bill in his hand. It was funny. 2 days ago, he would have felt as rich as a king to have that money in his hands. It was enough to buy 2 slices of pizza and a soda with his friends. It was enough to rent a video and have a late night at someone's house. It was enough to buy a whole bag full of his favorite candy mix at CVS. 2 days ago, he would have been jumping for joy. Now, he looked at the $5 bill and thought, it's nothing. Compared to the $100 he needed to win the war, $5 was nothing. He felt somehow that he'd been robbed of something, maybe the happiness he should have been feeling. He loaded everything from his stand into the wagon, making sure he didn't leave a scrap of litter behind. He still had a glass full of lemonade left in one pitcher, not to mention another whole pitcher already mixed up and unsold. So he poured himself a full cup. Then, before beginning the long, hot haul back to his house, he found an empty spot on a shaded bench and pulled his earnings out of his pocket. He counted once. He counted twice. Very slowly. He had made $65. The cups and lemonade mix had cost $9. When he added his earnings from Wednesday and Thursday, he had $103.11. Now that's enough, he thought. All right, kiddos, remember, what was Evan's plan in this chapter? Think about the chapter title, okay? Does it work? Why or why not? And you can kind of have a mixed answer here, okay? Please make sure that you use plenty of details from the text so that I know that you read, okay? You've got to make sure you're reading. Holler at me if you need anything. I love you, kiddos, and I will talk to you guys later.